Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us once again. I hope all of you are having a great day and obviously Halloween. So happy Halloween to everyone out there. Hopefully, you get some free candy or you give out lots of free candy. And at any rate, unfortunately, we did not feel the need to dress up for a radio show. Call us party poopers, but hey, it's just kind of the way things shook out. So with that being said, great show lineup for you today where we have with us a gentleman. He is, of course, a consultant and so much more. He is just super knowledgeable about cybersecurity in general. And we have a lot to talk about because, let's face it, about every other day we cover either a new cybersecurity attack or a new, a new finding of just how severe certain cybersecurity, hacks in the past have been. So to help clear this up, to explain it to you, and to talk about, hey, some best practices to kind of keep yourself safe. Always great to talk about. Joining us will be Dr. Richard White, and yeah, he'll be joining us in just a moment. But before we do that, a few things you should know, including computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything for today's show, including links to our guest website or any show notes, any articles, videos, just anything that you need to know about today's show will be included in the show notes after the program. You can find those at computeramerica.com again. And also while you're there, be sure to check out the social media contest, where every single Friday we give away a prize from our friends over at Logitech. And yeah, you can enter that. Super simple, super easy, and of course, super free. And the last thing is, the video portion, where you can watch Computer America, follow along with what we do, and, just adds another little element to what it is we do here at the program. But, of course, we are primarily, and will continue to be so, a radio show. So, with all of that said, we're just going to go ahead and get started here. And once again, joining us on today's show is Dr. Richard White. He is an independent consultant for cybersecurity and a professor of cybersecurity at the University of Maryland. I'm sure if I got any of that wrong, he is more than willing to correct me. But Dr. Richard White, thank you for joining us.
Hi, good afternoon. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be
none of that wrong, by the way.
Perfect. That's good. And again, glad to have you on. This is going to be good because obviously there's a lot of this in the news. I think it's finally to the point where cybersecurity has, hacks and breaches have affected enough people that talking about when, these attacks happen, it's finally mainstream enough. Well, I think people really understand that it's their data and their livelihood that is compromised. So, again, glad to have you on. Before we get started, why don't we get some background? How did you get started with cybersecurity, and kind of what's your background in this field?
Sure. It's actually I didn't stumble on to cybersecurity. It was a very deliberate path over the last 25 years. I have an information systems bachelor's degree, a telecommunications master's, and a PhD in information assurance. Since I was in the Navy, I've really looked at parlaying myself from a network engineer, systems engineer, into a good, crusty encapsulation of cybersecurity, and that's been my practice, that's been my scholarly pursuit, and that's been what all of my writing and my research has been focused on, the cyber aspects.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that you were in the Navy. We have had other cybersecurity professionals on the show, and quite a number of them seem to have a background in the armed forces. And part of me wants to believe that that's because, 25, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, it was more of a, specialty of, the military to have secure communication, blah, blah, blah. And it seems like when you get out of the armed forces, you just kind of took your experience and tried to, I'd assume, learn and apply it to businesses. Like it wasn't a thing 25 or 30 years ago, except inside the, armed forces.
100%, 100% correct. The opportunities and advantages today within a technical field within the armed forces are, amazing. Digital electronics training, basic electronics, specific system tool sets and procedures. You do that for a few years as a professional in any area, particularly U.S. Armed Forces, and you're going to find it a little easier to parlay those skills into a very rewarding and satisfying career.
Very, very interesting. So why don't we go ahead and get started with today's interview? And again, I mean, obviously we set this up a little while ago, but there's plenty of developments that happened just recently. So one that happened a couple years ago, and I think people kind of forget about it because, Yahoo, maybe because, they're being sold, they're not making as much news, but they were compromised a couple years ago. Could you give us a little bit of an overview for those of us who don't quite recall the Yahoo breach and just the impact of it, because it's been growing ever since it happened years ago?
Well, sure. Originally it was I'm not going to say a basic breach, but there was a Java breach, a Java issue that was breached by an outside hacking group, and they've got access to what at the time was reported 20 to 40 million user accounts. But as other forensic organizations came in to help mitigate and contain that issue within Yahoo, of course, we all know the scope. Now it grew to 143. I think we're at 180 million Americans, or overall. Pardon me, I'm getting my two breaches mixed up. My Equifax and my Yahoo. Worldwide, there were several. I think 1 in 3 people worldwide almost were affected, and at the account, the password, and username level, and that doesn't include or provide any detail on how the data were used, where the data went, how it was farmed out, and what path and what route it took once it left the autonomous edge of Yahoo, and how it was utilized underground.
Right. Yeah. And I don't blame you one bit for getting mixed up there, because Yahoo, when we first heard about it back in 2013, you're right. It was in the neighborhood of, 20, 40 million. And, the latest I could find personally is around October 4th. They finally said that every single one of the 3 billion Yahoo accounts had essentially been compromised, passwords, names. And so 3 billion people, I mean, and this is something I've asked and I've never really gotten a straight answer. Could you kind of describe, because I don't want to believe it was Yahoo trying to protect their stock prices, their shareholders, blah, blah, blah. I like to think that cybersecurity is just hard to really grasp. When your systems are breached, you don't know how far, how deep, how long the breach has kind of been going on. Do you think that they're learning as we're learning, or do you think they're trying to downplay it and then eventually all of the 3 billion, that number just got thrown out?
Yeah. Hey, I'm just going to tell you pragmatically what my experience is in the industry, and some are technical fact and some are my opinion. But the reality is during the initial breach, it was an in-house effort, and I'm going to use your words. They were learning as they went. It wasn't until they brought in another forensic service and they really looked at the vectors and the paths, and they looked at sources, and they really got a real contained scope edge around what this breach was. And unfortunately, it was, several hundred times more than they initially thought. What was the reason behind it? I think it's a little bit learning protocol on Yahoo's part, maybe a little bit of anxiety about having to report in totality without a full solution or full understanding of the scope. And I'm not going to say, malicious, or it was deliberate, or, or unlawful. But the reality is a lot of organizations today take a lengthy amount of time within regulation and regulatory requirements to report serious issues like this. And I think Yahoo is just the leading edge from a couple of years ago, example of what form that takes in some cases.
So we're obviously going to be talking about some of these other hacks that maybe have affected, listeners out there, be it Equifax, let's see, the big ones that we usually name on the show are things like Equifax, Target, Home Depot, obviously, pretty much, and I think Sonic, the fast food chain was just recently hacked.
Sure.
I mean, there's a lot of, I don't want to single out any one company because it seems to be, it doesn't really matter what you do. It's if you're big enough, you're a target. But speaking to Yahoo and some of these other companies, we have a question here about what should a company do when a breach occurs? Like, do you think that Yahoo handled this right by slowly bringing in, consulting team after consulting team, or kind of letting people know, such as Equifax, they didn't let people know until, or their
Right.
customers know until about 2 or 3 months after the fact. What's the right course of action after you know you've been breached?
Sure. I'm going to, again, speak from experience, and I'm going to speak pragmatically. The right course of action really depends on the industry vertical that you're in, finance, retail, telecom, utility, and it depends on what regulations and compliance metrics apply to you. So with that being the upper limit, what an organization should do if they have evidence that they've been breached is, first of all, they should involve their legal team. The legal team should act as the focal point of all communications, and then you start a dialogue with the legal folks, and they can also act as a mediator between any branding or marketing issues that may negatively come up. But your incident response plan should be enacted, and whomever that says to notify in-house and internal, that should also be taken into account. But you also want to look more outside of the breach itself. If you have a trusted third-party cybersecurity provider, contact them, bring them in, provide the details to them. Why do you think you've been breached? What evidence do you have to support that you've been breached? What changes have been made? What configurations is there? What state of your patching are you in? And these are just some of the fundamental things that any organization should do. Legal, internal resources, external resources, implement the incident response plan, and begin a log and dialogue with the legal team so they can act on behalf of the organization smartly. What you should not do is begin to make, I'm not going to say haphazard, but the only time after a breach is suspected or discovered, the only configuration changes that should be made are those made by competent, savvy cybersecurity professionals. You could do more to harm the investigation than you could in fixing the immediate issue, meaning there may be certain indicators that would help. If they were gathered properly, they may help determine whether this infection or this breach is occurring in other places within the organization. It'd be easy to search at that point. If you make a configuration change or you bring the system offline, you immediately remove that evidence gathering path for more detailed and more finite investigation. So I'm speaking very operationally and very pragmatic.
No, I completely understand. And obviously, we've seen other approaches that have differed from you. We've seen approaches that you say rally around your legal team. We've seen approaches that they rally around their PR team and they try to spin it or downplay it. We've seen them try to rally around the marketing team, such as like Equifax. They tried to really push their service for monitoring your credit instead of fixing their cybersecurity problems. Now, before we move on to kind of an individual level, I mean, my immediate question to you is, why do you think that this not only continues to be a problem? Because obviously you seem to have a very good grasp of best practices that a company can kind of take to minimize this or contain this, but we're only seeing this continue or increase in number and severity. Why is that the case?
Well, the reality is I'm going to kind of answer your question quickly, but in two parts. One, cybersecurity is now becoming part of a CFO's line item, and it's also part of the CEO board level discussion. But that doesn't mean in most or all cases that it's risen to the point of operational execution within all of these organizations that are being awakened by the recent cyber issues. So there's a little bit of lag time there. I am seeing an improvement, but I think there's still some awareness to move through. And the second is really where the problem is getting worse, because those that are awakened are trying to solve the problem with technology. And technology is just part of the stool that you sit on. I believe firmly in people, processes, and technology. And technology vendors are pushing this very expensive and in some cases, very good technology, but without the right people to implement it, without the right people to operate it, without the right skill set to maintain it, you really lose the ROI and therefore the impact of what it can do for you at the risk level. Additionally, if we're seeing the problem get worse because organizations are looking outward to technology and they need to look inward. They need to train and develop a culture of cybersecurity awareness at their user level. They need to have tightened and very streamlined, easy to implement, enforce, and understand policies and procedures. Now you get a well-trained workforce that has policies and procedures to follow and give them guidance in many situations with many variables. Now you have a lot of reporting eyes that can reach the top, or I've seen this, or this is a concern, our procedures say this, but this condition exists right now. And the actual hackers are taking advantage of that. So the technology layer may be getting better, and I use that word only for this I really don't think that. I think it's just existing.
Right.
But the hacker will circumvent either the technology or not even attempt to it and just breach the process weakness or breach the user weakness. And it's all the same to them. Getting the data is what's key, and being successful in and out with as low a risk as possible is key to them. And technology is not going to prevent them from attacking our most valuable and our weakest link within the cyber chain. People.
Right. Yeah, and we've definitely seen that to be the case. Time and time again, that it's you're right. No matter how secure you make a network, no matter how perfect your network seems to be, all it takes is one person with a random thumb drive, and you are compromised. It definitely gets to that point. So I mean, and one last question on this line of questioning is, do you think that, because I think what was at the core of all that was companies kind of treat cybersecurity as something that can be done reactionary. Do you think taking a proactive approach? A proactive approach. Does that have benefits, or at this point is it just it's something you should expect, and it's kind of like buying insurance? You just need to plan for it.
Okay, I say yes, and I am not being funny. But I say yes to all of those. The reality is you're right. Some organizations are being knee-jerk in the way they respond or consider cyber issues. But I believe in a very engineered, systematic approach to cybersecurity that starts at fundamental layers and moves into the more complex. And I think that as organizations begin to look at, it's not just a conversation that has to happen. It's not just the heated discussion or a vibrant discussion in the boardroom. Things need to move from discussion to funding to execution. And if organizations are concerned about the ROI of their dollar figure, I would say, first of all, you can't afford not to. That's the first thing. But second thing, there are much more practical and much more cost-effective ways to get a great return on your cybersecurity investment. And I won't keep preaching it, but it really starts more fundamental. The cybersecurity essentials, the fundamentals, training, awareness, culture, bring in third-party evaluators to do phishing, to do vishing, to conduct pen tests, and give those organizations a score and real hit sheets that they can execute operationally to improve their cyber posture over time. That's a consultant and an operational CISO's perspective, but what I see in the industry at all of the banks and all of the retail and all of the places that I've been asked to take a look at, I see nice technology spends, but I see very little fundamental elements being taken care of and nurtured and evolving to meet the new cyber threat. New things mean, culture, training and awareness, and third parties to come in and do evaluations on the users themselves.
Right. Yeah, and of course, just to be transparent, they are a sponsor of the show, but we have a service that's we learned about a couple months ago, and they do network monitoring. The idea that if someone is pulling data, pulling files, accessing it from somewhere that you don't trust or isn't really normal, then they'll be the ones to alert you that, hey, someone over in India is pulling down files from your server, blah blah blah. Services like that obviously are super important. But can you tell us real quick about some of the best practices? Because on the show we've talked about making sure not to click links in emails, not to use random thumb drives. If you don't know someone and they can't prove who they are, don't let them in your building, and definitely don't let them on a computer. What are some of the best practices that you kind of recommend a company or even just general employees kind of follow?
Well, the first thing. I mean, I hate to speak like motherhood and apple pie on your show, but the reality is you've said several of them. If you have a gut reaction to an email, it doesn't look right. The attachment is wrong. The spelling, there's grammatical issues, or it's an unexpected email. Don't click on it. If it's important, they'll follow up in another way. Don't risk being the center of the breach or the infection because you want to be helpful. Trust your gut and react with your gut. Call somebody who can come down and help you with that guidance. Other things are password hygiene. I'm going to hear cybersecurity experts probably try to beat my door down after I say this, but you don't have to change your password every month. Go through a regular password changing routine. Don't make them make them as complex as necessary to protect and provide the risk mitigation that your data require. Not all data require 20-character passwords with 3 random characters and letters and upper and lower. It doesn't all require that. Make sure that it's appropriate for the user effort and the risk that your data present or the breach would present to your data. Also, utilize encryption when and wherever possible. And I know this is a little more technical. Users don't have the opportunity to do this, but at the administrative and the cyber leadership level, if there's an area that you can utilize encryption, do it. Escrow your keys, make the appropriate safeguards so that you can access if and when an emergency occurs, but utilize encryption both at the user end level and certainly across your critical data stores, and verify that it's working. Also, basic. This doesn't really, I hate to consider disaster recovery and backup part of cybersecurity, but better make sure that your DR plan is well executed or has the ability to be well executed with no issues if you really need it, and that's not the time to find out. Make sure your backup is working. I know there's a general rule in the IT and the technology field to do 10% of your data every 6 months and write a report and fix anything that happens, but make sure include that into your overall cyber hygiene. And some of the other things are more closer to the person. Have a good and appropriate acceptable use policy. And I've been in organizations where it was a blanket no, and it caused more problems than it actually solved. If allow users to do and navigate the web, if appropriate, and if it's within your mitigation strategy, you'll have a more content employee, and you'll have less issues for the next thing I want to talk about, which is BYOD and other types of things.
Yeah.
And I think acceptable use of BYOD. So have a good BYOD. It doesn't mean no. The BYOD policy doesn't have to have a giant NO with an exclamation point, but it should be tailored to that organization and its risk and the data that's being protected by the BYOD and the AUP to be the acceptable use and the bring your own device. And I think, through there we get into more cybersecurity specific and technology fundamentals like, orphaned accounts, tighten access control, check for orphaned accounts, check for dormant accounts, and lock or archive them, and do that frequently and report them. Track your vulnerabilities through some type of plan of action and milestones. That's a government term, but track your vulnerabilities and execute on them. Track them till they're concluded, and look for new ones every time you patch, and which is another thing. Patch frequently. If a patch comes out and it moves to your test environment successfully, implement that patch. Don't wait, because there's usually a security ramification if we're waiting.
Yeah.
And I could go on and on. And
I can definitely see that. I mean, just real quick, you mentioned that the ability to recover a system if it's locked down. You seem to kind of waffle on whether or not that was a really cybersecurity thing more than a disaster recovery kind of option. But
right.
I mean, I'm sure that you know as well as anyone that's actually a viable cybersecurity kind of
bingo.
Prevention,
Yep.
Because
and
if you could talk real quick about the and I'm sorry, just real quick, if you could talk about how it would have helped the National Health Services.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, a good disaster recovery and a good backup. I mean, they would not have had, none of any of the lost records. They would have had, less, hardly any of the downtime, and it would have been I wouldn't say a blip on a report, but it would have been a much less substantial report to the regulatory bodies as well as the public had they been able to recover within a few hours and only lost a 6 to 12 hour window of data. But yeah, so I do agree that those aspects are part of a cybersecurity program, and I think it's making the migration from straight IT native into more IT cybersecurity planning and proactiveness.
Absolutely. So yeah, and again, you went over a lot of things there. Obviously, it's something that your company really needs to kind of shape a plan for themselves. Like I have a friend, she works in medical documentation, things like that. She's like on the payment kind of side, and they issued her a laptop to work from from home, and it's unfortunately so locked down that she had to call the IT department, and they trust her. She's very, very savvy, so essentially they just kind of unlocked her laptop. So the rules that were there to kind of protect the company from breaches,
right.
it's gotten to the point where they were so restrictive, it's it had to be worked around, and at this point
right.
they're ineffective altogether. Is that
Absolutely.
common?
And it's very common, and I hope I wasn't too over the top with it, but all of my responses to you have mostly been, make sure that your policies and your procedures are tailored to your risk mitigation appetite and strategy, and make sure that they're tailored to the type of data you're trying to protect. And when you blanket say no, where you lock everything down to where it's unusable, what you get are, there's an adage. It's, a dull knife that cuts you worse than a sharp knife.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that's the same thing we can apply here. An overly sharp, overly tightened cybersecurity edge can make things worse, because the only thing the user wants to do initially or after a very short time is find a workaround. And you get disgruntled employees, you get severe security vulnerabilities, and you lose the ability to claim compliance and proof and evidence. So yeah, I think that's very, very common, and it's something that leaders need to take a deep breath about and really tailor things to what the risk they're looking for, not just saying no.
And Rick, would you mind staying over for a couple minutes? Because I definitely want to talk about your book that you have that you're writing.
Yeah,
or have written.
happy.
But everyone, so we have Dr. Richard White here. He is a consultant for cybersecurity and a professor of cybersecurity at Maryland. We'll be right back.
Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
Hello and welcome back into the Computer America Show. We are 31 minutes past the hour, and that's right. We are continuing on with the conversation. I don't even want to say unfortunately, because I love it when our guests kind of run into the next segment. But again, hopefully we'll be able to wrap this up and talk more about his new book. And of course, if you're just joining us, Computer America, and we are talking to Dr. Richard White. He is an independent consultant for cybersecurity and a professor of cybersecurity at the University of Maryland. So, and again, Rick, thank you so much for joining us and talking about this. And obviously, we've been very, kind of high-minded here. We haven't, I don't really feel like giving some free advice to Equifax or to Yahoo about their breaches. But, obviously these are breaches that affect, individuals. And I'm sure people listening to the show. And actually, you mentioned something way back when about the true impact of Equifax. Last I had heard, admittedly, I tried to stay up on it, but last I heard, it was 143 million. I think you raised that number a bit. I mean, just real quick, talk about Equifax and what the individual can do, because I think this is the real problem with cybersecurity at this point, is that in a lot of cases, in a lot of the ones that we've rambled off over the course of this interview, these companies are not the ones affected, most by what they're losing. It's their customers. It's, especially in the retail space and Equifax. I mean, you never signed a contract. You never bought anything from Equifax. They just happen to gather, collect, and then lose everything about you. So what can an individual do in these situations?
Okay. Yeah, that's hey, it's a shame that something so catastrophic happens, and it really trickles down to the citizen. The American consumer is the one left holding the bag, if you will. But fortunately, there are some things that the individual can do. And while there are a lot, I'm going to name a couple of the big ones. First, you can lock your credit, and I don't mean a credit monitor, I mean lock it. You have to do it with each of the three providers, but it costs $5. If you're not planning on buying any large property, real estate, or automobiles, block your credit. That right there makes it extremely difficult for a bad guy to use your identity to apply for credit for. The second thing to look at are your credit card statements. Pay very close attention for anomalous behavior. Look at purchases, look at places, and look at dates. And if none of them match, ask. If you're in a household with a spouse, ask your spouse, ask your children. Make sure that line credit is not fraudulent, and if it is, you can call any of your credit card companies, and they have credit incident response individuals at a help desk that are, in my opinion, very good. Mm-hmm. Next, you need to look at your entitlement programs, your Medicaid, your Medicare, your Social Security. Has somebody applied for benefits in your name? Somebody using your Social Security number fraudulently? That's usually, believe it or not, that's usually the indication where people find out that they've been breached for years and years and years. And so check it. It's very simple to request a Social Security statement from, as I say, you can even do it online today. Next, look at your home mortgage fraud is something that's coming online quickly. I'm seeing a great increase in mortgage fraud. People build an identity, they fake being you, they fill out a few pieces of paper, send it in, and now they're applying for equity under the real estate that you own, and you don't even know it. It's not until you apply for credit or you think your real estate is paid off do you see that there's been a $50,000, $75,000, $100,000 equity line taken out by somebody claiming to be you that's not you. If you have any prescription drug services, make sure that they are not breached. Make sure that the amount, make sure that the type and the dollar figure are correct. And if not, make sure that you notify the providing pharmaceutical company or your doctor's office. The last thing I'll say is you can have your credit monitored, and we know there's lots of services out there to monitor your credit.
Right.
But I'm a believer in that as well. But the best proponent for you is yourself when it comes to your identity, your financial longevity, and the stability of your home economics. And with those few things, and it may seem like a lot because I've been much more long-winded than I really needed, but the reality is just with those 5 simple things, an individual can really go a long way in understanding where they're at with regard to risk, cyber, and their finances, but also get a much more solid level of assurance that they've done the right things. They're protected the best way they can be protected, and they could get evidence of this monthly or quarterly to continue to show. But I think that it's our responsibility let's call us users rather than citizens, as citizens to take these actions and to protect ourselves from identity theft. I'm not saying it's going to prevent it wholly, but at least you're taking the right steps to know if it happens and know if it happens quickly. And there's a strong correlation between time to detection of PII and identity theft to the overall cost and criticality of the actual impact. Some people suffer health issues as a result of identity theft, and I've seen how catastrophic it can be, and it's a subject, in case you can't tell, I'm very passionate about.
No, and rightfully so. I mean, and we, of course, I think that this is a problem that we're going to probably talk about again in the next coming months, because hearing about individual stories about there was a lady that recently went to certain publications and said that her identity has already been stolen 7 times after Equifax. I don't know if her name starts with an A and last name starts with an A, and she just happened to be the first one on the list. But yeah, it's really affecting people. And I'm sure, like you said about mortgages, I'm sure when it's time to file your tax return, that information is going to be all over the place. So it's
absolutely
definitely something to mention. Now, let's move on to, I think, one of the last things that we're going to talk about today. And as I understand it, unfortunately, I have not been able to grab a copy, but you have a new book. Tell us about the book and how, kind of what it's about. And then also, as I understand it, you've interviewed these cyber criminals, which I think everyone, whenever you Google cyber criminal, you see a ski mask sitting at a computer in a dark room,
right.
and that's a cyber criminal. But tell us about your book and tell us about interviewing, real cyber criminals.
Well, thank you very much. The book is Cybercrime: The Madness Behind the Methods, and it's really a 400-page kind of not anecdotal, but not humorous, but factual look and insight into the hacking realm and the mindset of why the hackers do what they do and how they do it. I spoke with people who have been convicted of cybercrime who are on their way to prison. I've spoke with people in prison. I've spoke with cyber terrorists. I spoke with international underground hacking groups, and every every facet of IT and cyber bad guy and good person in that spectrum. Consultants, white hat, black hat, gray hat hackers. Some I've met face to face. Some I was put to through a friend. Some even went so far as to provide some European context with regard to some Russian, some Ukraine activities that I found super interesting and included. But the book itself is about why hackers do what they do, how they learn their trade, how they communicate with each other in the underground, and how successful they really are, and what they think about technology and what they think about the barriers and the walls that we build as far as preventing their exploits. And bottom line is, we're not going to stop. The people that I spoke with and my research says that we're not going to stop the hacker with technology. The hacker is too sophisticated. The underground is too big. That's too well formed and like a very mature organizational hierarchy. And they actually are passionate and like what they do. What we consider barriers, they consider challenges. Our security teams, including myself, and I'm one of them, the good guys have to be right every single time, 1,000,000 out of 1,000,000 times, 1,000 out of 1,000 times. The bad guys only have to be right once. And unfortunately, the scales are skewed far in their favor. They understand that. They're very smart. They're extremely technically sophisticated in most cases. And they have a real will to want to circumvent the security barriers that we put up. And that point didn't resonate initially, but once I started to aggregate all of the data and I went back and I asked a few more follow-up questions, it really sat with me. And that was the point of the entire book, that these people, these men and these women, overseas, domestic, what have you, they are here. They're here to stay, and they consider our security infrastructures more of a pastime and challenge than something to keep them away from the prize that they're looking for.
Now, and I'm sure you found it in the book, but even though you interview people who were serving time for these kinds of hacks, and you talk with people overseas, like I really feel like part of this has to be the fact that I'm sure there's a level of this is a challenge and I want to overcome it. I want to be better. Forget these guys.
Yep.
But I mean, is it true that cyber crime, because it's so accessible anywhere, like you can access any American company from overseas very, very simply, is a part of it that it just pays? Like it actually is a viable form of income for people?
Sure. It's a viable form of income for the group of individuals that we're talking about, but there also is fame, there also is notoriety, and there also is a very well-defined hierarchy in the underground. And those cyber professionals that don't think so, they haven't been in the underground or associated with their own login and participated in it to know the real detail. But it's not. It is money. There's a large financial stake in their efforts because they're risking things and developing tools, and they need to get paid for them. But there's also a kind of a bravado against their coworkers. I hesitate to use that term. Mm-hmm. Their fellow hackers. I won't use the term colleagues, but where they move up the hierarchy to high-end super admins from being just a basic mule. And these are real terms in the underground, to an intermediary, to a real, sophisticated super admin. And those are the people that get to run, they get to call the shots, they get to form teams, take targets, and they also get to determine, in most cases, how the money is disseminated and where it goes.
Yeah, it's definitely a super interesting field. I mean, I'm not sure if you've ever heard of the gentleman. He's a regular correspondent here on the show, Scott Schober. He's also a cybersecurity expert. But we've talked about instances where these cybersecurity attacks, especially DDoS, because they're so pretty much simple to do. It's just pointing all this traffic at a particular address. You know, we saw the largest ever one directed at an individual's website. Like, it wasn't like they're trying to crack into a bank. It was very personal. It was very, you know, retaliatory in retaliation. I mean, so is that something interesting you found, or like did you think it was all just, you know, technology and whoever has the best tech wins? Were you surprised by the personal element to it?
I was. I'm not. I can't claim that I wasn't at least aware of it to some degree, but the depth of which the personal kinships and the circle of friendships occur in the underground, that and the difficulty it took me to get into them, and how I had to be introduced, and how I was vetted, and just a wide range of things. And when somebody is personally affronted in this realm, the response is a nasty hack or a nasty denial of service or distributed denial of service. And they're real, and their retaliations cause damage, and they're concerned about the impressions of their peers, you know, of them in this place. And I'm not going to say whether it's lack of maturity or just simply it's the field that they're in, but there is a very, you know, resentments go far, they run deep, and there are grudges held.
Right. So with that being said, everyone, once again, that was Cybercrime, The Madness Behind the Methods by obviously Dr. Rick White. And if people wanted to check this out, I think I found it here on Kindle. But what's the best place do you feel to look for it?
Yeah, sure. It's going to be at anysubject.com/CC. And the CC is short for cybercrime.
I gotcha. Yeah, and that's actually, if you're watching the video portion, that's actually where we're showing. So glad that worked out. So, and with that, Rick, unless we miss anything or gloss over anything, I think it was a lot of good information. The conversation went by super quickly. I apologize for keeping you over. But yeah, unless anything else, I want to say thank you so much.
Hey, it was my pleasure. Great conversation. And hey, feel free to call me anytime. I loved it.
Well, you know, knowing your field, that's probably going to take about a week, and then we'll have something to talk about. So, but yeah, it's great to definitely hear from you, and you sound like, you know, right up our alley, very, very professional. And everyone, once again, Dr. Richard White, he is, of course, an independent contractor for cybersecurity and University of Maryland professor. And Rick, once again, thank you so much, and have a great day. Happy Halloween.
Thank you very much. You too. My pleasure. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye. All right, everyone. So there he goes. And just like that, super interesting. And of course, you can find more in his book. It sounds like a a super interesting take on cybersecurity because, hey, there is that personal, you know, kind of feeling to it. So with that being said, before we go any further, I, of course, want to get to one of our sponsors, and that is ZipRecruiter, where, of course, ZipRecruiter, yeah, you may have heard them on the show before, longtime supporter, and here we go, saying that if you are in need of great talent for your business, but hey, you're short on time. Let's face it, the holidays are coming. It's not the easiest thing in the world to, you know, find a person, vet them, and get it all down in stone. So, hey, you don't have to get lost in a huge stack of resumes to find your perfect hire. Instead, you just need the right tools, and you need smarter and better tools. Emphasis on smarter. So, with ZipRecruiter, you can post your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards with a single click. That's awesome. So, you can rest easy knowing that your job is being seen by the right candidates, and then ZipRecruiter puts its smart matching technology to work, actively notifying qualified candidates about your job within minutes of posting so you receive the best possible matches. I'm sure there's lots of search algorithms and, you know, a lot of course, keywords, things like that, that just make it super, super easy. And that's why ZipRecruiter is different, where unlike other hiring sites, ZipRecruiter doesn't depend on the right candidates finding you. The program, or at least ZipRecruiter, finds them for you. Very cool. And of course, you can even get a head start on the interviewing process by adding screening questions to your job to help identify the most qualified candidates. So you don't need to waste time sorting through a stack of resumes to find the perfect fit. Only the best of the best will find their way to your inbox. So it's no wonder why 80% of employers who post on ZipRecruiter Get a quality candidate through the site in just a single day. Telling you, they should get into dating sites. It's this. It would really help if they had that. If they have this much success rate, maybe dating sites are up their alley as well. But with that being said, the easy-to-use ZipRecruiter dashboard lets you manage your hiring process from start to finish, all in one place. And of course, ZipRecruiter, smartest way to hire. So, of course, here's the part where you guys come in. You can find out today why ZipRecruiter has been used by growing businesses of all sizes and industries to find the most qualified job candidate with immediate results. And right now, our listeners can post their jobs to ZipRecruiter for free. Again, absolutely free. Just go to ziprecruiter.com/computer. Singular, no S, computer. Again, ziprecruiter.com/computer. And hey, give it a try. Could be just what you're looking for. All right. So with that being said, why don't we go ahead and move on to computer and technology news. Again, I want to say thank you to our guests for the first segment. And now we're going to go and try to fit a few of these stories because, you know, we have a number of them and they are, of course, super important. Now, we're only going to be able to get to maybe 2, maybe 3 of them. So why don't we go ahead and do this one? So this one has been developing over the course of the day. Not what you want to see for, if you heavily rely on Google Documents, not what you want to see. But as I understand it, it's something that it's a bug and it has been fixed. So if this has been affecting you, don't worry. The update is already on its way. So they said that Google Docs is randomly flagging files for violating its terms of service. And when Google flags something like this, that means you no longer have access to these files. Big problem. So you definitely don't want that erroneously happening. And they said that, and this obviously article coming from Vice and their motherboard section, but they're saying that obviously if you keep your files in a cloud storage, you don't have full control over them. You still have to abide by their rules. And they said that the original story involved Google Documents, the collaborative cloud-based word processing software, and they said that it was randomly flagging files for supposedly violating Google's terms of service. And they said that once a document is flagged, the owner of the document can no longer share it with other users, and users who have already been shared on a document that's been flagged are kicked out and can no longer access it. And if you're watching the video portion, here's a couple of examples of what it looks like. And essentially it says this file is inappropriate, can no longer be shared, and you no longer have access to it. So one Google employee on Twitter, who is a senior program manager, also said that Docs team is looking into the issue, and the official Google Docs Twitter account also tweeted that the potential bug was being examined. Now, there is an update to this article since I was able to grab it. This update obviously coming just about an hour ago, saying that a Google spokesperson reached out via email with the following statement saying that this morning we made a code push that incorrectly flagged a small percentage of Google Docs as abusive, which caused these documents to automatically be blocked. A fix is in place and all users should have full access to their documents. Protecting users from viruses, malware, and other abusive content is central to our user safety. We apologize for the disruption and will put processes in place to prevent this from happening again. Essentially, our bad. It was an erroneous update that was pushed out, and essentially it was accidentally marking certain types of documents as bad. So, as of time of this reporting, if this happened to you earlier today, don't worry, it's already been fixed. That's what we like to hear. That's problems that are problems until you actually learn of them, and then they're no longer problems. That's what we like. All right, so time for maybe 1 or 2 if we hurry up with this. Let's see. Okay. Check out this one. And this is from Engadget. I don't know how I feel about this because Razer, they're a great company. We've had them on the show before, and we've talked about a lot of their products because they do a lot of peripherals. They are mainly known for their mice, keyboard, mouse pad, headphones. They have full computer systems at this point, though obviously their peripherals are their mainstay. Well, looks like they aren't content with just that one little bit of hardware. They're going even further. So Razer is now, tomorrow, going to be revealing a Razer phone. And we have some specs that were leaked, and looks like the phone in all of its glory is kind of going after the same market they've always gone after. They're going after the gamer. So we know that Razer was working on a high-end gaming smartphone, but a leak from one of its partners shows just how powerful it might be. And according to a since deleted page from a UK mobile plan reseller, that the Razer phone will have a 5.7-inch display. So let's see, 5.7 inch, that might be like an iPhone, like the larger of the iPhone or Samsung phones. It's a decently large phone. Anyways, they said that it's 120 hertz IGZO display, so plenty of refresh rate. Dolby Atmos sound with dual front speakers and amps, so sound quality is going to be one of the best in the market. And a dual band 12 to 13 megapixel wide angle zoom camera with 4,000 milliamp battery and 8 gigs of RAM. So the RAM, pretty on par with other high-end smartphones. The battery, larger than most high-end smartphones. And the cameras are probably on par with other high-end smartphones. Obviously, they called it gaming, so they probably want to emphasize gaming in terms of augmented reality. Think Pokemon Go. And probably to an extent virtual reality, the space that Samsung with the Gear VR has been occupying itself. So it's going to be a pretty good competitor to, in those applications. And they said that adding credibility to the leak is the fact that 3G is a retail partner with UK operator 3, which recently announced an exciting global strategic alliance with Razer. So obviously the page that this was found on was a partner of Razer. Now, on top of gaming, the phone looks like it will be pretty nice for playing or even editing videos thanks to a fast, sharp IGZO display and 8 gigs of RAM. So obviously it will be pretty darn speedy. And also they said that they have a couple of other things such as the Qualcomm Snapdragon 835 CPU, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, essentially saying that it's going to be pretty darn good. Now, again, this is a first product from a company that doesn't make smartphones, so you can expect a few blunders, but at the same time, they seem to be really focusing this product around the fact that, well, yeah, you're probably going to be playing games on this. Now, Razer recently purchased Nextbit, which is a company that's behind the box-like Robin cloud phone. So while the device wasn't a success, Nextbit is having senior mobile talent from both HTC and Google. Razer was clearly looking at the acquisition as a way to build a gaming-centric phone. And the page could be a placeholder, so take it all with a dose of skepticism. But it's safe to say that tomorrow, which is when the event is actually going to be launching, tomorrow we'll learn more, but this looks pretty darn close to what we can expect. So with that being said, I mean, Razer, again, like a lot of their products, you have used a lot of their products and currently using their products, but getting into the mobile phone market and trying to market gamers to phones, that I feel like it's going to be a really hard sell. So we're going to have to see what they actually could debut because, hey, we've seen mobile devices in gaming try to go hand in hand, looking at you, obviously, NVIDIA Shield. And moderately, it works, but it's never a knockout, hey, we just discovered a new market or made a new market. It's going to be difficult, so we'll see what they can do. But everyone, in the meantime, thank you so much for tuning in. If you missed any part of the show, be sure to check out computeramerica.com for show notes, as well as audio-video archives and of course the podcast version of the show in its entirety. Check that out. So with that being said, be sure to tune in tomorrow as we have, who else? Mike Cermak. Every first Wednesday of the month, Mike Cermak will be joining us once again to talk all things computer news and just a fun interview. So everyone, have a great day. Thank you so much. And hey, catch you next time. Bye-bye. Oh, and happy Halloween.